Hey, welcome back to Connections Break Barriers. This is a special conversation series brought to you by the MBA programs at Kennesaw State University. This week's conversation is with Clyde Higgs. He is the CEO of the Beltline, and if you know anything about the Beltline, it is one of the more transformative projects that has ever happened, not only just in this city, but really throughout the entire country. We'll talk about Clyde's leadership style, some very important relationships that were pivotal throughout his career, and some other things. Looking forward to you being able to experience this conversation. I really enjoyed it. Thank you, Clyde. So Clyde, it's good to see you. I appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation.
Good to see you. Good to see you.
I have a lot of things I want to talk to you about. You have had a long and distinguished career. Before we get to all of that, I want to talk about home. Where are you from?
That is a great question, Ryan. And I'm a military kid, and so I'm giving you a little bit of context. Most military kids are from where they were born and where they finished high school.
Yeah.
Because we traveled so much.
Yeah.
But I was born in North Carolina in Fayetteville.
Okay.
Mom's side of the family is truly from Fayetteville, North Carolina. My dad's from Virginia, but then moved to Madrid, Spain.
Wow.
As a kid, so grew up in Madrid.
Wow.
And then came back to the States, was in California very briefly, and back to North Carolina, and then finished high school in Mississippi, right on the Mississippi Gulf Coast in a town called Ocean Springs.
Wow. So as many times as we've talked, I had no idea about the stop in Spain.
Yes.
How long were you there?
Almost 5 years.
Wow.
As a kid. I moved there when I was 7, came back to the States when I was 12.
Wow. I mean, it's just formative time. Wow.
Truly.
If you think about your childhood, and certainly through all of those different moves, what did you want to be? What was the goal growing up in terms of what you thought you were going to grow up to become?
Yeah, that's so interesting. I really did not have like a thing for a while. And all of my parents told me to like just go to college and figure it out. So like many people, first kid in the family to go to college. And that's all my parents, they just knew that if you go to college, everything would work out and it ultimately did, but I didn't really have an idea of exactly what I wanted to be. I had some natural proclivities to shapes, designs, and so the architect popped up in my mind. I was an athlete in high school, and so working somewhere adjacent to athletics and health.
Yeah.
And so thought I wanted to become a physical therapist. That was the first thought when I was going to college. Like I want to be a physical therapist.
Yeah.
You know, my crossover isn't quite working out, but maybe I can help athletes who have a mean crossover. Yeah. And that was kind of the mindset originally.
It's interesting how life moves you in totally different directions. I have a fundamental belief that our experiences growing up do though start to track onto the things that we do professionally. So from a values perspective, if you think about what you were learning growing up, what are some of those core values that you feel like are important to you now that were established then?
Yeah, so for my family, my dad was at the center of all the things for our family, and it was always about like service to others. And I know that sounds just like a tagline, but that was truly who my dad was, who he is. He was always the baseball coach, the basketball coach, the deacon in church. And so that's who my role model was. It's like, you give back to your community. And again, I know it feels like a tagline, but that's really how I grew up, is being of service to others. And so that really became like who I am. When I feel good, it feels good to give back and be of service in whatever it may be.
I want to take a quick step back. For folks that are going to watch this conversation, that the idea that I'm not quite sure exactly what I want to do, where that will resonate with them, what advice do you have if you're in that life stage? And maybe not even just a person that is younger. Maybe we're talking to folks that may be a little bit more older, but are still having questions about if they're on the right on the right track. What do you say to folks that are in that situation?
Yeah, I mean, retrospectively, for me, with my grown-up eyes on it now, it really is like, make sure you just learn a lot of things. Like and even now, I just, for me, I'm a lifelong learner, trying to get smart in various areas. If you ever get to a place where you really think you know it all, shame on you, because there's so much to get learned and get exposed to. And so that's really what benefited me, is having truly a diversity of experiences. And like all the things that I've done in my career, I did not know would prepare me for, leading the Beltline. It kind of worked out that way because I was bold enough to learn, to get exposures to various things. And that really, really helped me, Ryan, in ways that again, unplanned. Again, with my grown-up eyes, I realized that was really the calling card for what made me be, I hope, a good professional.
Fast forward a little bit, your first significant career opportunity, and I'm going to use significant lightly, right? I've talked to some folks that say, look, my paper route was a significant opportunity for me, and I've had others that have said, no, it was my first grown-up job. Right. that was that. Right. So for you, what was your first significant career opportunity?
I would say it was right out of grad school, and I got an opportunity to be a part of the governor's, I was in North Carolina, the governor's management fellowship program, and got connected to higher education administration. The crazy thing is, though, in grad school, I thought I was going to be a hospital CEO. That was the goal. So you see that healthcare theme there, and that's really what I wanted to be. And I got an opportunity with a former congressman, Martin Lancaster is his name, and he became the chancellor of the North Carolina Community College System. There's 58 community colleges in North Carolina, so it's a big workforce. It is the workforce development entity in the state of North Carolina, and got an opportunity to get connected to Martin. Didn't know him from Adam, Ryan. And he gave me an opportunity to work as a 20-something-year-old, recent graduate. He is one of those figures in North Carolina that's very revered. Just like in Georgia, we have those names you can think about in state politics, state government. Martin Lancaster is definitely one of those very revered names, and gave me an opportunity to work in his cabinet. I was his special assistant for workforce and economic development. Hadn't even heard of those words before. Didn't know those words at all.
Reflecting on it, what do you think, and I know that these questions like this are often difficult, but what do you think it was about you from his seat that made you a good candidate for that opportunity?
Yeah, that is, I try to unpack that, Ryan, to be honest. And I even talked to Martin. Now, of course, he's long, retired and living his best life. And I'm like, what did you see in me? Like, of all the graduate students that you could have given this opportunity to, what made it special? What made Clyde Higgs special for this opportunity? And he was like, oh, you did good in the interview. I'm like, no, I need more. No, tell me what does that mean? And once we started, he understood I was very serious about this conversation. And he talked about authenticity. And he says, even during that time, that's what I picked up in you as a 20-something-year-old graduate student, is the authenticity. And I appreciated that because we come from very different worlds. Martin is from Eastern North Carolina. I'm not from Eastern North Carolina means something, right? That means, perhaps if you're saying South Georgia, and that's kind of the equivalent for Eastern North Carolina. It is not Charlotte, it's not Raleigh, it's not Winston-Salem, Greensboro. It is
special context.
So that's the context. And you got a black kid, white, leader who gave that opportunity. And I really try to, like, Martin, help me to understand. But it was the authenticity piece, because he interviewed, graduates from Duke, from, all these high-flying places, and, he picks, a somewhat country boy from North Carolina and Mississippi for this opportunity. And but it was probably the authenticity piece that he identified as that why.
I imagine authenticity remains as an important value as you're sitting in that chair now for other folks. What other things are on that list for you? If you're looking at giving an opportunity to somebody, what are you looking at?
Follow up. Like, I wish I could give you like a very silver tongue, but just follow up and do what you say you're going to do. So if you say, Clyde, I'm going to send you this email to follow up at 2 p.m.,
do it.
Just do it. And that really, really sets people apart. It sounds so simple, but it's a very effective way to build trust and credibility, right? Show up as well. Again, very easy things to do. I believe that showing up is probably 60% of the work.
Absolutely.
Just be there.
Yep.
And there are folks that I've given opportunities to, like, hey, you know what? I'm going to be at the Four Pillars dinner where they're going to honor the Russell family. Want to sit at the Beltline table with us? And show up. And then you are surrounded by people like you, like T. Dallas Smith, like Frank Fernandez. I mean, just all of these leaders in Atlanta. And again, they don't necessarily have all the context to like why to show up, but just to show up, then the ball gets rolling from there. So those are some of the things that I look at.
No, I appreciate that. It actually reminds me, I don't know if I should say this on camera, but to the follow-up piece, I have noticed that one of the easiest ways to not have a conversation with someone is to say, let me know when works best for you. Because 9 times out of 10, folks just don't have the simple follow-up of even answering just that little question, right? It's amazing to me, right, how many things just float off into the distance. If you just say, okay, you tell me when you're good. So again, I probably should have admitted
it well. I think some people even take it a step, deeper than that. They use it as a way to create some additional space, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And let's just talk sometime first quarter of next year. Very ambiguous, right? Yeah. So I get it.
And very, very few times will a person show up first quarter of next year and say, hey, look, we said we were going to check in. I'm just doing that check-in. Yeah. I don't know about you, but like I always respect that when it happens because that's what we discussed. Here we are, and let's get. I am much more likely to try to figure out how to get that on the calendar when the follow up was there.
Absolutely.
I want to focus a little bit on your career. Right, you've had some amazing opportunities. So let's fast forward post North Carolina. Talk to me about some of the stops that you took along the way.
Yeah, it's been a fascinating opportunity. Again, I've been very retrospective, of late, and just looking back on career. And so I talked about the opportunity with Chancellor President Lancaster, but behind that, so people don't know, they look at me as Beltline CEO, but I actually have a science background. And so psychology, biomedical sciences. I was going to do a PhD program in neuropsych, and decided you know what? I think I want to go into helping people directly, public service, community service, healthcare, and so that's how I went that route. But when landed with Martin, that was a 2-year stint, the fellowship program, and then went to become the director for technology transfer and commercialization at North Carolina A&T State University in Greensboro. And there was another person there, Ernestine Salmons, Dr. Salmons, who was the vice chancellor for research, that gave this 20-something-year-old young kid an opportunity to be a director. So the profile for that job is someone that has a PhD in a hard science. They're probably in their mid-50s, probably don't necessarily look just like me.
Yeah.
So I did not fit the profile. But just going back to the connective tissue, Martin Lancaster, who gave me that opportunity to work with him, made that call over to A&T and said, hey, there's this young man who's working for me and he's interested in this opportunity. Can y'all just talk to him? And that talk, now when you get those opportunities, you got to perform, right?
Absolutely.
And I got that opportunity to do that. And so that was my first exposure to tech companies, to startups. And it was the first eye-opening opportunity to talk about revitalization in a city that needed it. And in Greensboro, there was a part of Greensboro, North Carolina, that hadn't received investment. And so the university was going to use its resources to try to help revitalize that part of town. And so did that for a while, and then was moving for family reasons to Dallas. And again, Martin Lancaster might call the head of the medical school in Dallas-Fort Worth and said, hey, Ron, there's this young guy that used to work for me in North Carolina. He and his family are moving to Dallas-Fort Worth. Want to talk to him just real. That talk led to me becoming the executive director for the technology incubator program there. And it was a conversation, just opening the door. And so you see this theme of Martin Lancaster being kind of that key figure. Didn't know him from Adam. Didn't know him from Adam, Ryan.
Wow.
And so did that job for about 5 years. And we also had the responsibility of helping to redevelop another part of Fort Worth that hadn't seen a whole lot of investment. We were going to use startup companies, biotech companies to help repopulate that area. And so you kind of see that theme, and then also got tapped by the governor at the time to be a part, help manage a $200 million venture capital fund there in Texas. So did that. Then we were making our way back at the time to North Carolina, another family move, and Martin Lancaster calls this very eccentric billionaire, David Murdoch, who owns Dole Foods, Castle and Cook Real Estate Development Company, and says, hey, David, I know you're developing this new $1 billion redevelopment project just north of Charlotte. There's a young guy that used to work for me. I think he wants to come back to North Carolina. You ought to talk to him.
Hey, we're going to get back to this conversation, but if you're like me, you're always trying to advance your skill set and grow both personally and professionally. One of the most effective ways to do this is through advanced degrees. I'm proud to be working with my friends at Kennesaw State University for this podcast. With 3 MBA programs to choose from, executive, evening, or web, their curriculum incorporates the latest industry trends and skills that will allow you to make an immediate impact in your career. With KSU's MBA programs, you'll benefit from a flexible format that fits your schedule, including part-time options, 100% online courses, and even a unique weekend format for their Executive MBA. Graduate in as little as 19 months while building lasting connections with a cohort of peers and professionals. Plus, you can see ROI fast with tuition starting as low as $20,000. Nationally ranked and featuring dual accreditation by AACSB International, ranking it in the top 2% of business schools worldwide, Kennesaw State University will help you reach your full potential. Ready to start your journey? Learn more today at ksumba.com. I have long maintained that. If you hear me talk about the gathering spot, I say very quickly, this stopped being a me thing and quickly became a we thing, right? It became stakeholders and community advocates, folks like yourself that said, hey, look, I'm going to be supportive of making sure that this thing has an opportunity to go. And as I'm listening to your story, it sounds like there are similar folks that have just shown up. But I think a thing that we have to double underline, I imagine 2 things, and tell me true or false on this. You were working incredibly hard, being excellent at every opportunity that we just talked about.
Amen. Yes.
So let's stick there for a second. So how important was it? So it's one thing for someone to make a phone call for you once. What responsibility did you feel like was due as soon as that phone call ended?
Yes. Fantastic. That really is the question, right? It is not about just the phone call but when you show up in that seat, you're bringing your personal brand, but also the person that endorsed you for that conversation. You got to kill that opportunity.
Yep.
And so, every time, this is not a braggadocious comment, but I got in there and I ate nails to make sure that we were going to be successful in whatever initiative that I was honored to give the opportunity to work on. And you have to do that at the highest levels. And that's why Martin was willing to not make that first call, but that second call and that third call, because when you get in that seat, you have to honor that opportunity there. And so that's the mindset that I had, and I was super afraid of just dishonoring what people are doing for me and the access that they're providing.
I think it's just for anybody that's watching this conversation, there's I think so much interest in the phone call itself, and there's way less conversation about the work that's required afterwards. Yes. And that's really where the meat is, right? Like there shouldn't be any shame about the fact that you've developed a relationship that then can be leveraged for other opportunities.
Absolutely.
The only way that would be dishonorable, in my opinion, is that if you didn't go there and do everything possible.
That is the question. That is the meat, Ryan. That's the meat.
Connected to that, and I think another thing that deserves applause, that feels foundational, that I think is important. You also were maintaining a relationship, it sounds like, over time, right? So that the second and third phone call could be made. Yes. There are a lot of people, phone calls made, they think that transaction complete. So what does, and I know this is going to sound like very 101, but what does maintaining a relationship across time, across distance,
for sure,
with someone that's going to sponsor or advocate for you in that way, what does that look like?
Just fantastic questions. And in the vein of Martin Lancaster, it was, and again, I wish I was sophisticated to know what I was doing at the time, but I was basically just doing check-ins with Martin. So when I went to A&T, like, hey, this is what I'm working on. I'm excited about this, and this is the why, and I'm passionate. I'm going to help Greensboro do X, Y, and Z. I was just excited. So me just sharing the information with Martin, I'm just like, I'm just sharing. But what it did is that connective tissue there. Because I would check in with him like from time to time and say, this is what I'm working on. And then him being such a connected leader in the state of North Carolina was able to give me like, you know what, you ought to call so-and-so about this initiative. They might be able to give you some insight. And so it was a mutually beneficial relationship. It wasn't one-sided. So yes, we talk about the phone calls, but I also was sharing information on the other side too about this is what's going on in my life, personal, professional. And so you just kept that relationship, you kept it maintained. And if he ever called me for something, super responsive there. Even after the phone calls, you have to give back to that relationship. So it wasn't one-sided. And so that's really what I did to maintain. And it wasn't transactional. And maybe that first interaction with Martin, he made it not transactional. It was a relationship like, hey, man, tell me who you are and where you think you're going. And he could have easily picked someone else for that opportunity, but really dug in, tried to understand. We learned we had a lot of common values, shared values, and so that's really what created this non-transactional relationship there. It just felt natural, and I would just share information, and as I grew in my career, then he became, it almost flipped, where mentee and mentor kind of flip a little bit, right? He's like, you're working on X-ray crystallography at this medical, like, tell me more about that. And so it started to do this, and it started to crisscross, and that helped to maintain that relationship and that credibility.
You mentioned, we've talked about a couple of different phone calls. I've been asking everyone this question. I call it the phone call test, right? There's a very simple, I think, test with everyone. When a name comes up on a phone, that there's a reaction that you have, no matter who it is. What do you hope folks feel when they see your name show up on their phone?
I hope they feel that a solution is coming. And that goes back to that sense of service. Like, okay, if Clyde is calling me, that there is a solution inside of that conversation. And because that makes me feel good when I see the people, you know, it's usually like, I know there's something good behind. Even if the conversation initially is challenging, but I know that there's something good at the end of the rainbow. And I hope that's what people feel when my call pops up. And it's difficult for me to, you know, this is a muscle that I have to exercise because I am naturally, and people don't believe this, but I'm a flaming introvert.
Me too.
Flaming. See, and we get each other.
Me too.
So that's something that I have to be very intentional at. And so if I do make that call, there's a reason there's value in that call. And so that's what I hope people feel.
I wasn't planning to talk to you about being an introvert, but it resonates. I am, and it's very interesting, despite what I do every day, which is about meeting people. I can spend a ton of time by myself.
All day, brother.
It was one of the, I guess, few upsides of the pandemic. Folks were like, hey, you got to go home. And I was like,
okay.
Sounds great.
Right.
Sounds great. We'd be there anyway.
Right.
To talk about the Beltline specifically, you are one of the most dynamic leaders in this city, bringing one of the most dynamic projects to life. I think people know about the substance of what is trying to be built. So I'm not going to spend as much time on that piece.
Yeah.
On the relationship piece, though, to get a project like the Beltline built, and maybe we start from, ideation through execution. There's been a lot of stakeholders.
Yeah.
But from your entrance into the work, the importance of people, relationship building, leadership, what has that been in order to make the Beltline a reality? And it might be helpful to set the scene a little bit, like for folks that aren't aware of all of what's been accomplished with the Beltline, what it is, and then I do want to talk about the people part.
Yeah, sure. So just a little bit of context for folks that don't know, but you know this, but the Beltline is perhaps the most consequential infrastructure redevelopment project in the country right now. It is going to be 50,000 jobs, $1 billion of investment to help people get around the city without having to get in a personal vehicle, making sure that the communities are benefiting financially, personally because of this investment. It's really about people at the end of the day. So think about this 22-mile loop within the city and all of the ornaments that are attached to that. That's really what the Beltline is. But it's about people at the end of the day. It started in 2006, and it's interesting. So we're coming up close to our 20-year anniversary, and I can't believe it, but it's happening. And it is the honor of my career to be here. I've been in my role for about 6 years now. I originally moved here in 2015. I was chief operating officer for 3 years, behind the scenes. Nobody probably knew who Clyde Higgs was at all. And then ultimately got the opportunity when the board asked me to interview for the CEO's role. And again, that's about 6 years ago. So honor of my career.
Can we put a brief pin? You just said something that I think will help unlock something for somebody. You were in a role that wasn't as visible as the role that you're in right now, but you're in this role now. So for folks that are in a role where they may not be as visible as, and I know that you don't do this work, especially as an introvert, for visibility, right? But leadership does matter. I think people do aspire to want to see, have their stamp on the things that they're working on. What advice do you have for a person that's in the number 2, number 3, honestly, or even number 300 spot at an organization to get to the place where the board eventually will have confidence to put them into a position that's ahead of where they are now?
Yeah, that is, and again, just being retrospective, I definitely think about that often, but it goes back to that brand, your personal brand, and I think what the board was looking for was authenticity, like who could really bring people together in a very authentic way and create space for other leaders, organizations to participate in the development of the Beltline. Yeah. And that was really important to them. Showing up in places that you need to show up, and someone that is intellectually humble as well, that doesn't come off as like a know-it-all. And I know that sounds like very simple, but for the time, and we can always debate if leaders are best because they're the best person or they're at the best time. I'm a personist. I happen to believe it's the right person versus just time. It's a little bit of both, yeah. Right? And that's what the board came back to me is like, okay, you're someone that can pull people together and authentically, because and I don't know if this is true or not, but people like, you know what, he's all right, yeah, and he's not a jerk, yeah. And it's that simple. Like, who can actually create space and want people to work and cheer for Clyde?
And that sounds simple again, right? But again, for folks that are not aware of what the complexity of the work that you do, yeah. There are so many stakeholders, right? I mean, I honestly, I can't think of another project that has as many stakeholders as what the Beltline has, all having to be maintained at the same time. Yes. Right? Because in order for it to get done and built, you've got to make sure that the developers and city officials and community leaders and the community itself, right? I mean, and that's just scratching the surface of the folks that have to be rallied in order to make this happen. So how have you approached that balancing act, I guess from a leadership perspective, but also from a relationship perspective, because I'm imagining that's the only way that it gets done.
And again, in providing space for people to provide some of that leadership too. So it's not all about me, it's not all about the Beltline, but what are the supporting organizations that can really help? And yes, that is the blessing of the Beltline, is that we have so many advocacy groups, be it the green space, the trail, the parks, be it affordable housing, be it transit, be it economic development and job creation, the arts and culture piece. We have to be multilingual at the Beltline because you have so many interesting verticals there in the work that we do, but then you also have to make them play together too. Yeah. And that is the key. And it can't come out of balance, because if it does, then there's going to be a certain stakeholder group over here that doesn't feel the love. But that's a big part of what we do, is create that equilibrium when it needs to be. But sometimes you need a little more resource over here, just like the affordable housing conversation is like, people wanted to hear when I landed in that role that I was going to be hyper-focused in making sure that we got to where we needed to be with regards to housing affordability. I'm happy that we're ahead of our goal right now. We're going to do more than what we promised the community on the affordable housing side. But that wasn't anything necessarily that I did or that the folks at the Beltline did. We listened, like, authentically, to say, hey, how do we do this? How do we get here? And this is, again, Ryan, about providing space for other smart people to come to the table and intellectually be okay with other ideas outside of the four walls of Beltline and in my mind. And we have been very successful over the last 5 years because of allowing people to come to the table. Probably the biggest transaction that will go down, whoever writes the next book about the Beltline, Ryan, is going to write about us from 2021, when the Special Service District was passed, the SSD tax.
Yeah.
In the middle of the pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
and ultimately that helped to raise about $100 million for us. But that's because we provided space for other smart people and organizations. You were even in that conversation. The Atlanta Business League was a part of that conversation. Our developer community, they were marching and saying like, hey, this needs to happen. It wasn't uniquely, Clyde Higgs or just the Beltline team, but we provided space for people to come in and advocate for us. And that's what leadership does, is provide space, you create the environment for people and their superpowers to be shown. And that's what we did during that time.
A quick examination of Atlanta. You mentioned the impact that the Beltline has already had. This thing's almost finished. We're getting closer every day. And what's interesting about this project, right? I think I hope that folks don't lose just all of the work that goes into making these efforts happen. It seems like, like over time you'll see a park in your community and just say, well, that's X, Y, and Z park, but not realizing that at some point in time it probably was hotly contested. There were people trying to figure out how it was going to happen. So we're about to move into a new stage of this thing where it'll be finished, and my kids won't know an Atlanta without that didn't have a Beltline.
Right.
What do you think the lasting impact? Right. We know the immediate. We know the. What do you think the lasting impact of the project will be? And I'm calling it a project, but of this entire effort will be, and then map that onto Atlanta. Right. Like, where is Atlanta going connected to that?
That is, again, just fantastic questions here. From an impact perspective, for me, I think it's a project that the people of Atlanta can really call their own, that this was born from the people. Mm-hmm. This was never a top-down project, but it was born from community that wanted to see this happen. And I just happen to think that Atlanta is the most important city in the country right now for all the other things that we can talk about, be it our airport, World Cup, Super Bowl, most educated city, most Fortune 500 companies, our culture, Atlanta is really that city to me. And I think what the Beltline has done is provide a place where we all, truly, we all can come together. Yep. Because if you look at the demographics on the Beltline, it's Atlanta, right? Yeah, and we have the data to support that. Racially, age, gender, it's Atlanta. Yeah. And so for me, I think it's that sense of pride that it really is the people's project. That's what I think the Beltline will be as we think about 2030 and completing the entire loop. It's the people's project at the end of the day.
I'm very grateful for the effort, right? As a person that has personally benefited from being close to the Beltline, and I remember when the East Side Trail, I guess the extended part of the East Side Trail opened, and it revolutionized. I was living in Midtown at the time, and it revolutionized just the way that we were able to live in the city. I mean, it connected us to neighborhoods that, we knew about and had experienced, but being able to bike or walk or run to stuff is just, it's a game changer. Yeah. My last two questions. You've built some phenomenal teams. You mentioned all of the teamwork that's required with external stakeholders, but you also internally have had a lot of great folks on your team. Talk to me a little bit about that approach, right? Like, who are you looking for, given the experience that you've had where there's been investment in you? How are you thinking about investment in not just the folks that are on your team, but folks that you meet in the city?
Yeah, that is, yes, we have phenomenal people and again, I'm blessed because I get a chance to be the face and talk about all the wonderful things that the Beltline is doing for the city of Atlanta. but the 75, 80 people that work for the Beltline every day, they are rock stars in their own right. Yeah. And that's what we've done in our organization, is populate the organization with just key people, not just the technical talent though. So that's the key. So yes, we could hire any engineer, civil engineer, any architect, any real estate finance person, but they have to truly believe in this. This is not just a job. If you're the most junior person or if you're the most senior person in the organization, you have to passionately believe in what we're doing, because we're stepping on hot coals. We're going through the fire to make this happen. And for someone that doesn't have the constitution to be okay with that, you're just not going to be successful. Yeah. And so my goal as a leader is to make sure that you're always pouring into people, and from a mentorship perspective, helping them to see the visible that was perhaps invisible to them before. Just like even in my career, what Martin and Dr. Salmons, Ernestine Salmons did for me, I did not know even jobs like the Beltline existed before, right? Totally invisible to me. And so them giving me those opportunities that way, it feels like it was perfectly planned this way. All those experiences that I've had, from economic development, construction, community revitalization, venture, like all of that stuff prepared me for where I am today. And I wish it was planned that way, but what they were doing is giving me those invisible to me opportunities and making them visible. And that's what I'm really trying to do with our team, is like, hey, go hither and do. And we have people that are passionate about the work, and they're also technically excellent as well.
My last question, and this is again one that is important to me, and I've asked everyone. You've mentioned some of these folks, but I wonder if there's anyone else. So with extremely successful folks, you are out all the time talking about your work, what's happening in the city, specifically what's happening at the Beltline, and your career, right? I know folks call on you on an ongoing basis to get career advice and to help chart their own path. My thesis is that there are always people that we wish that we could spend more time talking about because of the impact that they've had on our lives. Yeah. And so my last question to you is, could you talk to us about one of those people that you wish that you had more time to talk about, given how much you're speaking?
Yeah, that is, there's so many, right? And I would say, I talked about my dad for a while. So Ernest Higgs has been absolutely phenomenal, and dad and mom, but my dad was just really that figure, strong, disciplinarian, military man. But I would also say, haven't talked about him much, but my grandfather, Alfonso Higgs, who I thought walked on water. He was that eloquent, silver-tongued man in Virginia that the community loved. Yeah. And see, and I didn't get a chance to see all of that because we got whisked away to Spain, California, Mississippi, then back to North Carolina. And so every time I got a chance to go back to Portsmouth, and I'd go to church with my grandfather, my grandparents, people loved my granddad. Yeah. I mean, he was that figure, like the same figures we have here in Atlanta. That guy. Like my granddad was that in Portsmouth. And I didn't get a chance to see that every day because, we lived in other places. But I looked up to my grandfather so much, and the advice that he would give me, cup half full, way more than half full. And I think about it, God rest his soul. He passed in his mid-90s. My grandmother passed too, but Alfonso and Tiny Higgs, they left a big mark on who I am and what I aspire to be. Our community loves them. Yeah.
I appreciate you sharing with me.
Thanks.
No, it's special to hear about the folks that are behind special people. So I appreciate the time. I know that you're extremely busy.
No, I love this.
You're building a thing that I know many of the folks that are going to watch this conversation are going to be like, thank you as they're watching it, because it's changing the way that we're able to engage. And I don't know if there's a greater honor that a person could have in professional life than to be able to look back and know that millions of people will have had the opportunity to connect with one another because of the efforts that you spent every day facilitating that opportunity. So genuinely, camera or not, I know they're here. Thank you, because it's one of those that this entire conversation, the series, is about connections, and I couldn't think of a better person and a better project that represents that than you. So I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Ryan. This was good therapy. Thanks for having me out here, and just really appreciate what you do, even your friendship. And it is definitely not transactional. When we do call on each other, it is very intentional, and I definitely appreciate that. And this just a forum just to have this conversation. So I appreciate it.
We'll see you soon.
All right.